Energy. 5, 6, 7, 8. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Smart in Public podcast. This is a podcast that talks about life and PR and comms. And I mean, we say this every time. And here I am just forgetting mid sentence what we're saying. But we're, we're so glad to have you here. And we're so glad also to have a guest again. Like, people are sick of hearing Duffy and I talk about just shooting the shit. Shooting the breeze. So you know what? We decided to bring real experts on to actually talk about experts things. And so we've got Daniella Vallurupalli with us. She is the Vice President and Head of Global Communications at Cloudflare. Hi, Daniella. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's so great to be here.
We're so excited to have you today. And, we were introduced through a mutual friend of ours, Chris Knitzko.
KK.
Bless him. KK.
Yes.
Everybody will know who he is by the end of season 2, I feel like, just based on
I hope so. Yeah. And we are trying to get him to come on, but he's shy. But he's connecting us to wonderful people like Danielle, so it's so nice.
Cool. Yeah. I also said that I was shy and don't usually do these things, but he proceeded, to move on. So
Well, one thing that we were really excited about talking to you about, and that we're going to kind of dive into all aspects today in the pod, is really about the idea of a comms person and how you guide a team through an IPO, even as early as a year out. And this was something that brought to us, which we were really excited about, because it's really something that I feel like people do not talk about that much. And I feel like, one, it's because the process might be different for everyone else. Two, it's kind of something that if it's the first time doing, you as an expert or on the comms leader on your team, you feel like you need to know all the answers, but it's likely that you're just kind of like figuring it out. And I just feel like there's so many moments that could apply to the IPO process for non-IPO things as well. So we're so grateful that you brought this topic to us, and we're so happy to have you on. And maybe why don't we just start kind of first talking about a little bit about you and your background.
Of course. Well, again, thank you for having me. It's great to have a show that's dedicated to comms folks, because there aren't that many. And there are more things that are happening, I think, over the years that are bringing great comms people together. So it's wonderful to finally be connected to you and everybody else that's been part of it. But I started my career in the agency world. Shout out to all the agency folks over the years. And actually, that's where I met KK a long time ago. But I started in consumer tech and in enterprise communications, everything from small startups that aren't around anymore, have been displaced by the iPhone, or all sorts of consumer tech kind of gadgets and things over the years that were really fun, all the way to big, large companies that are more in the enterprise world. McAfee was an example of that back in the day. Logitech, it was really fun. Salesforce, which is where I know a lot of your colleagues, and so being in the agency world was fabulous. I knew I kind of wanted the next step, which is kind of going in-house and trying to figure out how to tell the story when you're sitting with the product teams, when you're sitting with the engineers, kind of telling the story under the hood of what you see from the agency side sometimes. And so I did that. I went to a company called SuccessFactors. At the time, it was the fastest growing cloud company in America. And then it was acquired by S.E.A.T, and it was a completely different company really quickly for me. But it was cool because you get to see kind of the rigor around what it was as SuccessFactors. And then you get to see what it's like to work for a really larger global organization like S.A.P.
Yeah.
And so after that, I went to a company called Pre-IPO, and they used to be agency clients back in the day. And then I ended up working with them. They're fabulous. And they connected me, the founder of Pre-IPO connected me with Matthew Prince, who is the CEO, the co-founder and CEO of Cloudflare, where I am today. So fast forward 11 years, which feels like a really long time in this world. And I've been at Cloudflare from, employee 80-ish, all the way to, we're approaching 5,000 employees, and we're a publicly traded company now, and $60 billion market cap. It's a totally different time. but it's been such an amazing journey to start from where I did to now. And Cloudflare, just so people know, we make the internet faster and more secure, more reliable, and more programmable. So we've got the developer platform as well. And every day there are, about 270 billion cyber attacks that we're stopping on our network. And we've got about 20% of the internet that's running through our network right now. So it is a really big opportunity to tell lots of cool stories, and it's been a great journey. That's why it's kept me busy for 11 years, and it will continue to keep me very busy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when you stay somewhere so long, some people, because I was at Salesforce a long time as well. But what I used to say to people is like, it just isn't the same business year on year. And I would imagine it's very similar in a company like Cloudflare, is it just keeps growing and different challenges and different things. But I think that's why it's 11 years, but it's kind of 11 years at very different companies all through that stage for the one company.
Absolutely. I mean, Salesforce is such a good example, right? Just the acquisitions alone, bring you into so many different markets. And we have not done as many acquisitions at Cloudflare, but there's just so, what we were doing when we first started, it's like, and the TAM gets bigger and bigger and bigger because there's so many new things and so many new products and so many new areas all the time, which is so exciting. It's a great place to be.
That was one thing that I really loved about Salesforce, was that particularly like going in region and getting to do like the smaller version of HQ again, was getting to work with like customer marketing, keynote stuff, and now that's kind of the same opportunity where you get to have that whole umbrella, maybe not those particular functions, but you get to kind of try everything out and see how it grows with the business and see what sticks within your programs too.
Absolutely.
So when we kind of first started talking about picking this IPO topic, it really came from you. Like Devassi and I, as I mentioned, were so excited that you'd brought that up. I guess, why did you lean towards this topic? Like, why was this something that you really wanted to kind of bring to light on the podcast?
You've got lots of great people that have shared awesome insights, and I've been listening along too. And, this is one of those things where you've either been through this or you've not been through this. There's plenty of people who have not, right? I say IPOs are kind of like weddings. You fantasize about it, you think about it, you imagine what that might be like, right? Then if it happens, you've gone through it, then you quickly become an expert on all the things you love about that process, or the things that, were hard, and all of it in between. And then you're kind of like, great, I have all this knowledge and I don't know if I'm ever going to use this again, right? Like,
I was just thinking,
you're like, what do I do now? And so I think one of the best things, what I appreciate the most about having like a great community of comms professionals and colleagues, is people need to share more. And I think like this is one of those opportunities where I've had people who were like, hey, here are some things I learned, or here's some tips that were important, and I didn't know anything. And so if I can help open that window, or even if it's a question to someone, and be like, hey, how do I even get started? What do I think about? This is why I want to do it, because I'm like, oh, great, here's something that I've been through and I can talk about my experience. Hopefully that helps somebody.
And I think one thing that you brought up too, and we were talking about this before the recording, was just like, execs haven't been through it either, right. So keeping that in mind as well, and being their guide and understanding, getting under the hood of the process.
It's one of the few things. So like, you'll be at a company, there are people that have been there longer than you. There are people that have been, more tenured in their career, just generally, right? There are folks that went to business school or didn't, or, all sorts of things that you're thinking about all the time. You're probably not even thinking about it, but it brings you all together. And with an IPO, right? It's kind of very much a level playing field moment where you're kind of looking around the table, and there might be one or two people that are in the core team working on this that have been through it at a company before, not as a banker or not as a lawyer, right? But like on the management team. And so this is your chance as a comms professional to come in and be like, whether you've been through it or not, I'm the expert on this. I've done my homework. I know what to do. I know what to expect. I'm going to be a key partner. And that is the mindset I think that, comms professionals should come to the table with. Like, getting a seat at that table is really important. And then just making sure that you're, a strategic partner to all of the players is just, it's what makes a good comms person separates them from an exceptional comms person in a role like that.
Yeah, and I think often, leading up to an IPO or a company thinking about an IPO, often you think it's the finance team, it's the legal team, and it is those teams, but that they're dealing with one specific element of it. Whereas I think the comms person has a really unique role in kind of being able to sit across that without getting into the weeds of like the legality of it and how we're going to set up, it's kind of sitting across it to say, what does this mean for our business internally, externally? What does it mean for our founders, and trying to have that whole vision? So I think you're so right. Is like starting to think about yourself in that role. If you know the company is heading that way, I think most companies would love someone to have kind of sit there and take that overview role versus the individual pieces.
Look, if you're in communications, and I don't really care where you are, I feel like this applies all over, right? It's like we are used to taking the gaps and filling it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many gaps, and we just like, this element of the event wasn't thought through. Great, we're on it. Like, we'll fix it, right? Like, that's how we are, right? And so no one's going to come in with a playbook and be like, here's how you run your IPO. Like, I mean, people advise on it and people have the experience, but there isn't like a one sheet that everybody follows. And so in the world of, there are lots of swim lanes. Here's an opportunity where you can be like, oh, there's actually a lot of gaps, but I can be the person that comes in and bridges the gap and is that great partner to everybody else. That's when you would really become invaluable in the process. And that's what we're used to. It's in our nature. So that's why I want people to really see, like, where are the gaps and how do we do it?
Yeah.
So it's all stuff we're used to. That's for sure.
I guess I was just going to kind of dive into at what stage does a company even start thinking about an IPO? Like Series D for me feels like what the natural progression looks like from a market standpoint. But like, are there exceptions to that? Like, when should comms people start to think about what this could potentially look like?
It's a great question. So there is no magic number. There is like, you got to be like, wait. There isn't like you have to hit these prerequisites and that's it, right? Like, there's so many different types of ways to go public also. But, it first kind of starts with like, what does your company want? Like, what do the founders or the leaders want? Because there are plenty of phenomenal private companies that could absolutely be public and aren't, right? And so that's a decision to start with. Then there are companies, plenty that I've worked for or with that are, every 12 months you hear the CEO come up and say, we're going to be a public company one day. And then like, that never happens, right? So that's okay. Like there's a balance between it. Now, a lot of people say, you have to have a couple $100 million in revenue, or you have to hit like $1 billion valuation. There are all sorts of benchmarks. There isn't like a silver bullet or a number you have to hit. But I really think that the thing to remember is you can work at an organization that is not part of what they want to do. It's not what the board wants. It's not, and so really it starts back with what is the decision, and then is this something that financially you're ready to do? And then you kind of you get everything else lined up.
And it starts also with, you mentioned the founder conversation.
Right.
So really having that conversation with, the CEO or the founder of like, what is the actual goal that you have for this company, and getting under the hood, maybe when you're narrative building or anything like that, when you're just starting it in the role.
And many people, you could be interviewing too. And you're talking to a founder or anyone, any executive that you're interviewing with, and sometimes it's part of their like, hey, here's what we're going to be in 5 years, and like that's something that has been talked about at a company. It wasn't the case at Cloudflare. When I came in, I went from an organization that talked a lot about the future of an IPO, and when I came to Cloudflare, it wasn't something that really was brought up at all in the beginning. It was more of just like, we have a huge mission, we got to just keep our heads down and keep building. And so that wasn't really a thing. And then one day our CFO came to me and was like, this is coming up, and we need to get ready, and we need you on board to help us. And it was, he came to me way in advance, which was great. And that's really important. That's like step one. Like, make sure you're working with leaders who know to call on you, because there is so much that can be done, and there's so much that should be done getting ready for that moment. You don't want to start too late. And a lot of people think, comms, they're on PTO during the quiet period. There's nothing that they're like, what are they doing? They can't talk to anyone. That is not true at all. There's a lot to be done. And so,
Yeah.
anyone that's listening to this, even if your company's not even talking about going public, thinking about how to get ready to be that larger organization, this is all stuff you can start now.
So with that in mind, let's say I think you make a really good point. Like, make sure you have the relationships with your CFO or whoever is kind of in that realm, whether it's just the founders, but having that relationship so that they know to give you the inside track that this is something we're thinking about planning for. But let's say that's the conversation's happened. We're going public, probably in 18 months, let's just say.
Right.
As a comms person, what would you kind of start to look at first after having that conversation? What are the ducks that you would start to get in line?
Totally. And in that conversation, I was like, I had all the questions. Okay, well, what does that mean? What does the prep look like, from your perspective, from CFO perspective, right? And so, he walked me through, like, you got to think about compliance. You've got to think about getting all the financials ready and all the other stuff. And then, of course, our as a communications team, your focus is, how are we thinking about telling this to the world when we can? How are we setting ourselves up for success until that time? And how are we thinking about delivering it to employees when we can? I mean, there's so many aspects of how you're telling the story, and you have to be lockstep. And so I think about, let's pretend that moment just happened, and you're like, okay, what do I do, right? I kind of think about it as, I like listed all the stuff out, and I was like, oh, we got to come up with something so that people remember. But it's like, you got to think about it as your seat at the table. And so seat is like, if you remember anything.
Yes, I was hoping you were going to have
exactly. And so,
snappy way to say this.
Seat is S, start there. It's your stakeholders. You want to make sure that you are in with the stakeholders. E, educate yourself. Like, this becomes your masters in IPO, right? Like, this is your night. I think you have your day job. This now becomes your night school. This is what this is. A is assets. You got to make sure all of the assets that you can control and shape now, before the world starts to look at you, knowing that this is coming up, are intact. And there's a whole method to that. And then, T is tracking. And you've got to track the conversations that you've had with media, the way that you tell announcements, how often you're putting announcements out, because that all becomes, especially during a quiet period, you have to think about, what does regular course of business look like? Well, if there was no regular course, it's harder to continue to do those things while, you're in a quiet period. And so that's kind of the, like, if you thought about all the things, once you have the seat at the table, then you just need to make sure that that seat is next to legal. And that you're asking them questions. Oh, like, hey, it's so great to, I gave our corporate counsel a big hug, and I was like, I am so happy to be working with you. And he was like shocked, but I'm like, you have made my sleepless nights go away, because now I have somebody to ask.
Yeah.
And we can move forward. It's amazing.
Well, I'm obsessed with you now after giving everyone an acronym to remember that. If I wasn't before, I definitely am now. One thing that you mentioned in tracking that we talked about, earlier this week, was tracking the media. Can you just share with our audience, like, specifically what you started to do in tracking conversations that way? Because I thought it was so clever.
So we're in a kind of like, IPOs are kind of revving up again after a few years of it being very different. And so at the time when Cloudflare went public, it was something where there were always kind of people reaching out, speculation. Are you guys going to go public? There were always kind of questions. And so, also being in cybersecurity, there's a lot of paranoia all the time. And so I created a tracker, and we literally put every inbound, who it was, who it came from, like when it was, and what our response was to everyone that reached out. Because you also don't want the response to look, these are your media relationships. You don't want to like look like you're not, but they know that there's only so much you can say at the same time. So try to make it as human as possible. Make sure your friend that sits next to you in legal approves it all, but like, we kept it all there. And it was great because then when you look back and you're thinking about, okay, what is my media strategy when we have to think about what that day of looks like, we also then went back to that and said, hey, reporter, I know you've reached out a lot and there was nothing I could say, but finally, there's an opportunity that we can, and I'd like to talk to you first. Like, you can still make it personal. They know the limitations that come with this, but it was important to kind of have it all. And then also there was the aspect of, you also want to just have anything that you've said
That's what I was
about it.
thinking.
And I just felt better sleeping at night knowing that it was all there. And if anyone ever wanted to ask, it was like, I didn't have to go through my email to figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, and also in that preparation phase, I imagine, you might have before not been talking about it at all or ruling it out. And so you want to kind of start to think about, what are we saying externally that doesn't necessarily negate it, but obviously doesn't confirm it either. But yeah, I think that's a really smart idea.
And even in the earliest days, like, the moment that you think that this is something that might be on the horizon, even getting together with legal and just saying, here, if anyone asks, here's what we would say in writing, or here's what like an executive should say, as they're speaking. It's nice to just have that. You don't need to do that in the heat of the moment. You could do that early, and you just feel better to have it, and then it makes everything a lot easier. So that aspect of tracking was really important. The other aspect of tracking was, that I think everyone kind of, I didn't realize at this time, was we were doing a lot of different announcements all the time. We had product announcements, all sorts of things, but there wasn't like a regular, it was like as they happened, right? And it's like, ship it, it's done, ready to go, right? And so, which is exciting. But there were also some things where having regular announcements that are like quarterly or monthly, or some sort of cadence that or momentum that came out on a quarterly basis, that's really, really important too. Because sometimes, especially when it's during a quiet period, if you're able to show, I've been doing this for years, this is how we've made announcements on top of the fast ship things as well, then it's regular course of business. And that's really what is the difference between being able to do something or not being able to do something generally in a quiet period from a comms standpoint.
Is that from and I'm sure this is a US, but that's a US regulation thing, right? So if you can demonstrate that you've been doing this on a cadence as regular course of business, then once you're IPO and you're public, you can continue that cadence, right? But if you haven't, you can't, you have no leverage to say that.
Again, the thing with quiet periods, nobody is putting together a quiet period to harm the business, right? Like that's not like they want you to still operate in a way that's supporting your business. But the goal is to not pump up the market on a stock or in a way where you're trying to get investors to buy Cloudflare stock or any stock for that matter, right? And so just making sure that you're not referencing an IPO, making sure you're not referencing something forward-looking or talking about something that is not in an S1. Anything that the S1 is like everything is in there, and so anything that's not in there is kind of new information and not something that you should be bringing up before that date that you do go public. And you're probably like, okay, S1, what is the S1? Yeah,
I was just gonna say, like, let's talk. Tell me like I'm 5.
Okay. So there's this is the highest level, but like comms perspective, not your friend in finance, but the the process of kind of the IPO, it's going from you're selecting bankers, and you kind of figure out what that makeup looks like. Maybe it's one bank, a couple of banks, like that's how that works. And then you're spending a lot of time working with them on again, all of the different preparation, drafting, all of the financial information, kind of messaging and how you want to talk about yourself externally to the world. And a big part of this is the S1. And that is the document, the holy grail of how do you describe the company, what you're setting out to do, what the success of the company looks like, who your customers are, any disclosures or like worries that might come up as a business, like all of that is in the S1, and that becomes this like big document that really, is kind of like everything you need to know. It's like the cheat sheet, right?
Yeah.
So then that process is when a lot of people hear officially, oh, this company is going to go public because they file the S1.
Yeah.
See.
And
Yeah.
so when that goes out, that you can file confidentially and you can iterate on it. But when the actual, it's like out there and it's public to and it's public to the world, that is like a public flip, right? That's what it's called. And so that is when people know what's happening and they can read up on everything. They've got everything kind of in one place. Everyone gets the same information, about the company.
And there's no way of hiding that. Like everyone has to do that at some stage.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
one.
you can file confidentially too, right? But one aspect, they know that you filed, and so being able to
Okay.
kind of see everything is, that was the route that we ended up going with ourselves. But like that also is an interesting time because that is the same document that like when employees are asking, well, tell me like more about what are we like, what is going, what's happening. This is also something that like, again, the whole world is kind of seeing this document as like, here's where the business is today and this moment in time. And it's at that time at the public flip where we weren't even allowed to tell our employees about this, right? Because employees are shareholders too. And so that's weird, right? As a comms professional, like you're like, oh, I'm used to being able to be so transparent at this size, or say all the things. Transparency is still really important and something that we've valued so much, but that's kind of, this was like the first time where the meetings start to become private, right? Or like the shades go down in the room and you're like, well, that's never happened. So that was also the day that we, found, we shared it with employees, and that was a really special moment for us as well. And then you kind of go into this quiet period officially. And that is the part where no, comms is not on, our out of offices don't show up. But it's the time between that period and then when you're actually, then you go public, like you're on listing day, you ring the bell or however the exit looks like for you. And then there's a period of time afterward that also becomes like part of the quiet period as well. So in that time, the S1 is all of the information you can share about the IPO. You can't reference it from a comm standpoint. You can't answer questions outside of anything that's literally written in the S1. Another material that people put out is the roadshow video. So that's a video that kind of accompanies that. It's only available for a short period of time, but it's kind of the movie version, I guess, of the S1, and it's kind of a glimpse into more of the like. A lot of people use it to make it more about the culture, what the company,
the human side of it.
the human side of it, which is such an amazing production to watch and have done. And then at that time, at least 2 weeks before, around 2 weeks before the actual listing day, where you're officially a public company, that's where they do the roadshow. And so that is less of a traditionally comms role. I was not on the roadshow. That was something that our CFO and our head of IR and our founders were working really hard to do. And that's kind of like pitching. It's almost like a sales pitch, right? Like you're going out and talking about the business and getting to know, all sorts of people that are going to be following you. And so again, all those things happen. You got to keep them like, where they are. And then you're not able to talk about this outside of those areas. So comm standpoint, don't respond to the, there's not much you can do to talk about the IPO. But if you have that quarterly announcement that comes out, at a certain time, or a product announcement that's like, that makes sense to put out, like those are all things that are regular course of business. But even like when we were talking to employees, even telling our employees, like, hey, if you see a tweet that's like, oh, Cloudflare is going to go public, or they just filed their S1 and, like any kind of speculation, anything about it, retweeting is like tweeting. It's like writing it yourself.
It's like,
It's like, do not engage. This is kind of, we want to make sure that we're really buttoned up on this process.
I can only imagine like the cultural shift that is happening within comm or for comms within the company during this time as well. Like thinking about, you know, the startup world and how everyone is kind of all hands on deck, and you got to have this like entrepreneurial
Right.
spirit, and everyone's kind of reaching across teams. And then all of a sudden, from a communication standpoint, you start to structure and put guardrails in place. Like, can you talk a little bit about like what
Yeah.
like pre and post IPO comm strategies looks like, and what that looks like running a team?
Well, the good news was a lot of the structure of like, if a journalist reached out to you, like, do you take that call? Like, how do you like all of the like kind of like the tips and tricks, the do's and don'ts, like the like guidelines for social media, for public relations, for all of this, like that was all something that actually I had already been part of in a big way. So we have orientation. That was like a session. Any new employee was kind of part of here's kind of like the guidelines just generally. So the good news was this was not a net new concept.
Yeah.
The part that was harder was, okay, now we have this news and we can't talk about it. Like that's public news that we can't talk about. That is a weird feeling no matter what. And that was probably one of the only times you're going to go through that in that big of a way, with so many people kind of knowing that there's news
Yeah.
out there. And so, I think the best way to do it, at least for us, was, again, transparency is really important. Being able to break things down and like be as human as possible and like really like give people the tools to be successful, not a robot in terms of this process, was important. And so we just spent a lot of time. Like we talked to the team, we shared what was going on. We're like, we brought people along. Like we did a whole presentation of here are the pictures from the last couple of months of like what we've been up to and what we've been doing, and like this is an exciting time, but this is by no means the end all be all. This is going to be a milestone, and then the next day, like we're still working on lots of big things. And so because it was framed that way, I don't think that there was this like I think people were proud and excited, and they knew exactly what to do. If someone reached out, they'd come to me, or if they had a question, they could come to our alias that we shared with people on the PR side at least. And the more that you equip people with what to do, the better, because no one's going to remember the statement you tell them, right? So it's more of like you can give them guidelines, but really just make it as easy as possible for anyone to get that information or know how to reach you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you touched on though is maybe important for some people who are maybe in a really early, stage of you had already set up a lot of the kind of PR guardrails. And I think that is important because otherwise it's a big shift for people culturally, to suddenly know that they have to be careful about what they're doing on social and careful about, if a journalist, all of those guardrails. Like my advice would be, have those already in place so it's a natural place of business that's how you behave. But I think the other thing I'd love to pick your brains on is the transparency piece, because I think a lot of startups share wins and customer information and a bunch of stuff that once you sort of go public, you need to be a little bit more careful in this current climate of like how much you're giving employees. So how do you strike that balance once you've sort of flipped without sort of being a shock to the system? Do you think you start that pre-IPO so they start to see that there's a little bit less of that, or you explain it to the employees that that's going to be the case? Like, I'd love to get your feeling.
I was really worried about those things too, because you don't know what to expect, and you think about, okay, here's how the org is today, and here's how it is in the future. There are actually a lot. When you really step back, there are a lot of things that can continue on pretty openly. You get that big customer win, or you can still share information about, hey, we got this great logo and here was the process. And you're not sitting there and talking about, well, where are we at the quarter in terms of financials before earnings hits? Like it's not, there are still ways to be able to share information that helps people be better at their job and helps people kind of like tell the story of the company, that are not things that are like insidery that would be problematic. And so, so I think, and then, as you get older as a company too, there are lots of points where you start to see that certain meetings or certain groups that come together are kind of more focused on like a certain topic versus like a company-wide presentation on X, right? So it is, I think we've been able to do a really good job of maintaining the like who we are, and how we bring people together and how we tell stories while also following all of the guidelines and making sure that that is always super important to how we do business.
Yeah.
Those guidelines, it's so funny. I keep thinking in my head about, going from Salesforce where we had all these systems and processes kind of in place. That it just became second nature to me as a comms person because I was there for so long. And then going into the startup world, I feel like I am now like, hey, yo, everybody, just calm down, when really like it's completely fine. But it does like take that shift. So I can only imagine as someone that's not in comms as an employee, like that would take some practice as well. So I
think too, like
really
again,
relate.
great practices, whether you want to go public or whatever the trajectory is, but especially when someone sits with you and goes, hey, we've got some sort of an exit that we're working towards, or this was kind of the defining moment for me at least, but you want to get in best practices mode early. And that's why, like, my funny acronym S.E.A.T, but like track, right? Tracking was not just like, the announcements that we were doing, but that was also about, okay, that blog post that's going out that I need to review, that number, that fact that went out, the percentage of whatever we were talking about, right? It's like, now we want to make sure, like, this is a good time for us to be like, every number that goes out there, you should see a comment that's like, and here's the backup for it. Not that I ever didn't expect that was going to be how, like, it wasn't to test the team, but it was more of, because lawyers might ask, like, how did you get this figure? And it's like, don't make more steps, just show them so that you have it already in there. So it was those types of things that like went a long way in terms of, that's very basic at the end of the day, but it was something that was like good hygiene that we were just kind of doing as we went. And then when we become public, that's a whole other thing. Another thing that was a great hygiene moment, which definitely not taking credit for, but I was part of, and it was such an awesome experience, was we would practice earnings calls. We would literally do mock earnings calls. We'd write the script. I'd write a press release as if it was earnings. And we would go in and sit down and go through, read the script, do it exactly how we do it actually today. Minus, we did not share this with the public. It was like, it was a mock thing that we did every quarter, but we were really regimented about it. And that was important because by the time that we actually did our first earnings call, that is a very scary thing if you've never done it before. And there's a lot, I'm sure, I can't even imagine, but because we came to the table already, we had done more than a year, almost 2 years of these.
I think this is one of the best tips ever, seriously.
And I'm not taking credit for it. And our CEO, that was something that he, felt strongly about.
Yeah.
We were not that company that made up fake things to like, we didn't have enough time to make up fake things to beat a deadline. But this is one of those exercises that I think was so important to set us up for success, that first earnings call at least.
Yeah, because I think it's a new muscle for everybody. And you don't want to do it the first time being your first earnings. Like, that's just not the right way to do it. And it also helps you to understand the different players and who needs to be involved in that script and how long is the script going to take to approve. And I think all of that muscle to get that ready, to know, okay, we can usually get this script ready within a week, or it takes us a day, or whatever it is for your company. But I think even knowing that, to say, okay, we need to start the script at this time because we know by the time we get to earnings call, we want it to be, ready to go, or how much prep the CEO needs, like all of that stuff.
Well, I'm laughing because I would love to actually go see the first one now that I should actually go back and look at what the first one was, because we didn't have a CFO at that time. We didn't even have investor relations at that time. And so, like, I was like half writing it with somebody else on the team. Like, it was, and where do you learn about this? I just started listening.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You're doing everything you can to just like work, or like go, all of the scripts are online. Like, you can go see all the transcripts are out there. And so, and then some CEOs, Benioff has a very specific style, right? And he delivers it, right? Yeah. But it's entertaining. Like
it is.
don't need to be boring just because it's an earning. Like, it's great to have that glimpse
That's
into a
true.
company
Yeah.
that's like people look forward, and I'm sure they still do, but we know back when I was studying all of these, people look forward to like hearing what's he gonna say, right? Like, and that's cool.
I think
Yeah.
Having
thinking
a
about it,
personality through this whole process is so important. Like,
yeah,
it's
that's
very
interesting.
easy
I
to
think
not.
people lose their personality a lot. They kind of go, oh, we have to be super buttoned up and super serious. But I
Well, it
think the
feels
other thing is know your players. So like Benioff was always going to be the visionary on those calls. He was always going to be painting the future. He always talks about a customer. You know, it's kind of, and then you would have whoever was the CFO at the time was usually a bit
totally.
more level, a bit more,
Mhm.
you know, in the numbers, all of that stuff. And that's not a bad thing if you have a founder and a strong CFO to play
Yeah.
two roles in that call. To your point, you can have your founder have a little bit more riz in that call, and then you know have someone who's buttoned up and kind of knows what they're doing from a not that Benioff didn't, but you know have that player who's the serious one.
In my, like, in my documenting phase, I don't know what happened last week. I feel like things are so busy. It's hard to keep track of all the things that are happening. If you have an earnings script that you look forward to every quarter, that's like really taking that moment in time and talking about, like, that big exec that was hired and what they're going to do for the business, or
Yeah.
the customer wins that were really important, that it's almost like a time capsule, right? When you
Yeah.
look back on it,
Yeah.
and it's really cool to see these scripts, because if they really do have the personality of the company at that time in them, it's like we should make a book and put them all together one day.
It's such a good point. Like, even thinking about every quarter, I remember having to get regional customer stories for that earnings transcript, right? And so going every quarter and thinking like,
not easy to do.
surely we don't have any. Like, we can't be doing this every quarter and we did, and it was really cool. And I just remember thinking like every quarter, like, whoa, we've got like 4 that we can offer up for APAC. That's so cool, you know? And it really does show like the momentum of a company, particularly. I mean, like, hashtag blessed with Salesforce, like always doing well. And so we were able to always have these great customer stories. But it's cool to see that momentum from quarter to quarter.
Absolutely. So, like, again, there's a lot of stuff, like, just having, like, there's every part of this could become very dry. So really, I think it's up to the comms folks, especially, to push the agenda of, let's keep this us in the process. And I didn't need to make that push by myself at Cloudflare. Like, that was something that from the top down was absolutely a goal. And that was great because it felt like everyone was on the same page, and that was exciting. And I remember, our co-founder, she tells the story of, in the beginning, the bankers were like, okay, well, what's your goal? Like, in this process, like, what do you want out of it? And I'm sure there are lots of responses to that over the years that they've heard. And her response was, I want to have fun. Like, this is going to be hard, and it's going to be a big achievement, and everyone's going to be working together, but like, let's make this something we're really proud of and have fun and, be proud of it. And so that's a great mindset to like remember throughout this whole thing, whether it's the FAQ you send to employees or whatever. Like, make it feel, it's way easier to keep it in what the lawyers send you and just go with that. It is way harder to like get their approval and make it something that feels like you, but I highly encourage that.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned something before that I thought was really interesting about the employee stuff and how you took photos and used photos to kind of bring them on the journey with you. And it's kind of a nice, because it's not actually sharing anything that's, sensitive, but it feels to an employee like, oh, I'm now seeing the inside workings and I'm feeling. So I think little things like that, I just wouldn't have thought of that, but I think it's that kind of little bits and pieces along the way that really make that more human and more fun and all of those things.
I'm a fan of photos no matter what. And actually, even take photos. I don't even care if this has to do with the IPO or not. Take photos of even the weirdest things. Because I look back on some of those with the most fond memories. Like, even what the office looked like the first office.
Yeah.
And we're going through a whole thing right now where I'm putting together all, we're about to be 15 years old as a company. And so I'm putting together like all these photos of, memories. And sometimes even just seeing that one random picture of your desk that you didn't need to take. And you're like, But that was a moment because like you're like, look at what our desks look like and look at what look at all the stuff we had on it. And it's just a totally different. So that's big. That's a big one. And then also thinking about, the photos bring people along, but like the stories I think
Mm,
are really important. So after the fact, once you become a public company, like there are lots of ways to kind of share, what was it like to like go through, like we did fireside chats and, all sorts of things where
yeah.
people were able to ask those questions. And that's so important too. Um, and again, you go through all of this, you think about kind of what it feels like to be on a podium somewhere, ringing a bell at the end of all of this, but your whole company can't be there usually that day
Yeah.
physically. And so the other aspect is how do you make this something special wherever someone's watching it from,
Mm.
and like make them feel like they're a huge part of this journey. How do you do something special to recognize that? And I don't mean you have to be partying in Vegas, right? But like, what are you doing that's special that kind of is uh, the right experience for a moment like that?
Mm. How did you guys, when you finally did, what did you do on the employee side for that?
So we had offices all over, and so we had someone I really admire on the events team was kind of managing all of the um, office activations. And so we would have people come into the office, and for some it was very early in the morning, and for some it was really late, depends where you are in the world. But we had kind of the ring the bell moment, and people were watching that. Everyone was in orange is our color, like that's the color scheme. And so everyone was it was a sea of orange and all of these things. We had photos, we had cake, I think champagne to toast. Like it was not over the top, but it was like really
But a moment.
meaningful
Yeah.
in a moment. And I remember on everyone's desk was a signed copy of the S1 from our
Oh, I like
founders.
that.
Like it was more of a thank you to like being part of how we got here.
Yeah.
And then there was a reminder to everyone that the next day is just another day, and we're all going to move on and and work
Yes.
hard and
Keep
but like
working.
that's like that's who
Yeah.
we are, and
Yeah.
it
You're
fits
about the
really well.
mission and what the work that you're doing. Yeah. Yeah.
And don't underestimate like the importance of really getting that day of feeling right, whether it's with
Yeah.
employees or at an exchange. Like again, IPOs are like weddings, and the comms folks are not just dealing with the swim lane of what we usually do. I mean, you're thinking about what the schedule is for everyone that's going to be a main stakeholder in that day. Did they
Mm.
eat breakfast? I mean, this is crazy, but it's like that. I would make sure everyone had food delivered, right? Like, and they made that option. Hair and makeup for the folks that are going to be on screen doing all of these interviews and things.
Yeah.
What is everyone wearing? Like, this is like the
Yeah.
biggest moment you've ever had as a company. That photo ringing the bell is going to be probably the most shared photo for a very
Yeah.
long time. You don't want everyone to go up there and look like they're part of a bridal party. That's the one wedding faux pas, right? But you want them to look uniform, and you want it to look like it was
Yeah.
thoughtfully done. And orange is a hard color to do that with
I was
sometimes.
gonna say orange is not everyone's color. Yeah.
Color. But like, all of those things really, really matter. And it's like when we're taking photos, how we're going to
Mm.
shuffle everyone to get to like the moment at the right time, and how we're going to get everyone keep the energy up while it takes a while to actually get everything ready to go to be listed. And so those are all things that like comms had a very heavy hand in. And at nighttime when you're done with the day, it's like you're like, okay, great, now I'm looking up orange ties that look good, and
I'm
aren't
gonna
all
say like orange pocket square, a bit of an orange tie. Yeah. Yeah.
and like how do you make it exciting for the person that's going to be part of that, right?
Yeah. There is so much goodness in this. Yeah, I just think there's so many people who haven't done it before, as you say, and it feels like a bit of an area that is a little bit gatekept. So yeah, it's been so interesting to hear all the different things, like the preparation. I'm like, get started early, everyone. That's my takeaway.
But even so, like again, on the day someone comes to you, right? Like that's kind of the moment I'm sharing with everyone. But like if you're interviewing at a company and they're telling you that going public in the next couple of years is something that matters, start on all of these things now. The seat thing, don't worry, not everything, but like at nighttime, I would literally watch videos of people that just went public on their first interviews from the exchange that they're sitting at, and how they reacted when the stock price is going up while they're talking, or when it's going down, or what were the hardest questions that were coming their way, which CEOs did a good job, which did not. Like, and I've made that part of our training where I was like, this is an example of a bad interview. Like, this is an example of a good interview. And you just like, this becomes your pet project in a way, to just really fully immerse yourself in it. And that's what was so cool about it, because then when you're done, you're like, oh, I really feel like I know a lot from the calm standpoint in this.
Yeah. I think that seat at the table, like the more that you really want it and the more important that it is, like the more you will need to learn how to speak like everyone else at that table. And a big part of that is just doing a lot of homework.
Well, the homework is very important because that's what keeps you credible at that table.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about this, the stakeholders, and like a lot of people misinterpret that as, oh, I know our CEO, and oh, I know our CFO, and I know our CMO. Like, we work well together. That's only one part of really working with the stakeholders. Once you evolve into this process, it's really important to remind them how you would add value to this process. Because no banker or lawyer or anyone's going to come in and say, here's the guest list for the call that we're going to have. Like, all these people should be in the room. You really need those stakeholders to say, oh, wait, we're talking about messaging, or this might have to do with messaging. Let me just bring Daniella. Like, that's what you want them to, that you want them to think of, like, I don't know if Daniella should be here or not, but let's just invite her. You want to be in that situation, because this thing can keep going without you being fully involved in the process. And that's where you lose all the details.
And that's where I think some of these things fall down, is comms gets brought in at that last mile of like, hey, we're just about to, and there's been none of that prep work, none of the tracking, none of the different. And I think that's when, as a comms person, you might be able to pull it off, but it's certainly not going to be as successful, and it's a scramble for you.
Well, and a lot of times CMOs come in and say, oh, we don't need comms till the end, because they're thinking about the branding aspect. And they're not thinking about, do the execs need to do headshots? Because they're all about to be, out there front and center, and we need to make sure they all look uniform and like they're the right age, and like all of the things, right? They're not thinking about, you're landing that panel at an event that you've just worked hard to secure. The moment that I was like, all right, we're getting this, we're like about a year out from going public. I'm like, no more panels. We need to be the company that we are telling the world that we are very soon. And we need to be fireside chats, or it needs to be a keynote. You need to start, it's like the dress for the role that you want. You need to start acting the role you want from the very beginning, early.
That speaker transition is something that I was curious to hear from you as well. Just like the mindset shift that you need to have with your executives and how they show up, and like what that time frame looks like beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you keep business as usual for as long as you can, right? So like nothing they don't stop going to something because this is something that's looming. And then of course in the quiet period, sometimes it doesn't feel appropriate to have some sort of a keynote or a fireside chat right ahead of this, especially when you know that the temptation for someone to come in and ask about, okay, well, we all want to know, right? And it's like, why do you want to put them in that position? That's really hard. Even the best have a hard time getting out of it sometimes. And so, those types of things, stay similar, right? But you just want to make sure that the people that are going out there and representing the company are the ones that are representing it in the way that you want to show up as that public company. And so, that Salesforce has a very rigorous speaker training, which I've always admired. And so really making sure that you're really giving people the tools to be successful and show up well and know how to navigate things as you're learning how to do that as a company is just the basics, but so important at this time. Going forward, once you become a public company, some of the things that you start to think about too are, going to a financial event, being a speaker at one of those things, or going to a business broadcast show, for example, right ahead of earnings, even if that's normal course of business, that is tough because it's really hard in the heat of the moment to not say something forward looking and not reference something. And that's more cautionary, and something that you want to avoid. But you also don't want to do, have an executive speaking at a conference the day of an earnings call either, because that feels like they're not very involved in what's about to happen, and you want to make sure that that's unless it's one of those things that like you've known about a long time and it's a very special case, but like it's those types of things that you just start to become more mindful of in the cadence of all the business you're doing.
Well, I feel like we're not supposed to say that there is a playbook for an IPO, but I feel like this is one. Or at least a masterclass. Are we allowed to say that? I don't know. But
I think so.
Yeah, Daniella, thank you so much. This has been just so incredibly insightful and helpful, and definitely thinking about, has me thinking differently about some of the stuff that you've talked about here as well. Just curious though, like you've walked us through so many smart ideas. Do you have a dumb in private that you want to share with us?
Plenty. So this is funny, but this is something I think is very common in our industry. If it's work related, you're like, I'm on it. Yeah. If it's in your personal life, you're like, oh, let it go. Like that's not the urgent thing. And so I've noticed what keeps me from going on vacations as often is that I just don't care about researching. I just want to show up and follow. And I'm happy generally as long as I know who I'm following. Like that's going to be a good experience, right? Because it's like you work so hard and then you just want to like just not think, right?
100%.
Yeah. So my dumb in private is definitely I can't pull the trigger on making a decision on where to go, what to do, what's the restaurant. Any of those things, I'm kind of like, can someone else please do that? Because I just want to
go
be
all
there.
the way down to like planning dinner, like
that's fine. It's always trips for me. It's like that feeling of like you don't want to like go take your family somewhere and then be like, oh, that was not a good decision, or that it's like I just want everything to just go smoothly. This is part of what we do, right? Like you want to like over prepare, and I don't like to do that.
That's why it's so funny, is because like you'll be up at night watching CEO earnings videos to do your homework, but you're like, I'm not researching a trip. That's it.
But then I have to look at reviews on, forget it. And actually ChatGPT has been great. So that is something that's been really helpful in that process, because then it's like, okay, I'm traveling with a child and, I have 3 days in this location. Like what's the best way to hit these 3 landmarks? And it's like, it will give you a recommendation.
Never even thought to. But more importantly, is your partner a planner of holidays? Because as long as one of you is doing it, then it's fine.
So what happens is he says, okay, you get to pick. And then I sit there on it for too long. And then he goes, okay, you just need to do it. So and then he goes, okay, you just plan this. I'll do all the rest. And so that's, but it's lovely. And I appreciate him very much for it.
Do you know where you're going? Have you had any involvement?
No, I'm just kidding. But it's like, but those are that, we all work really hard. It's great. It's good to find partners or friends or people in our lives that counter the things that we're not good at. Because we can't be good at everything, that's for sure.
You need the balance. That's all. I'm like, it's okay. there's things I'm not going to be good at, and I'm okay with that. I married someone who's good at them, so that's okay.
My girlfriends for years have always said that I'm just the one that's like, it's like a group of girls walking. I'm just kind of the last one, like beep, 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 just following everybody. Like, who planned it? Where are we going? What time's our flight? Where is the shuttle going? Like, are we in a hotel?
Yeah, as long as you're the good friend, and like as long as you're not complaining about anything that goes wrong.
No, I'm just happy to be there.
She's fun. She's fun. She just hasn't planned it. Yeah. I can attest to this. Is like boyfriend's a great time, but she's not organizing it.
No,
I'm right there with you. We'll be the plus ones to any great time. That's for sure.
Yes, there with bells on.
Exactly. Hacking is hard enough as it is. Forget planning this trip. So
Exactly. 100%. Daniela, thank you. Thank you so much again for joining us. Like, it's just so good to get all of these different perspectives. I know that Duffy and Duffy, have you done an IPO?
Have not joined Salesforce. It was already public, and prior to
Yeah.
that was all agency stuff, and mostly with public companies already. So yeah, I've just learned a ton. And obviously,
Same.
I'm currently working for a company that is private, but potentially, will go public at some point. But it's just so interesting, and I think the preparation piece and just starting to think about it, I think, is like my big takeaway alongside S.E.A.T, which I love.
Yeah. Big fan
awesome.
of S.E.A.T.
Well,
S.E.A.T's definitely going in the description of the podcast.
oh man. All right. Well, I'm always here if you have any questions. And I think it's like, go talk to your friends that have been through it. It's the best way to, just learn more about, the specific thing that you want to drill down on, or, it's always good to go to people you admire and just be like, tell me what you regret the most, or
Yeah.
what you do, or you learn so much.
Yep. Well, thank you so much again. And if anybody has a topic or a guest suggestion or anything that they want to kind of reach out to us about, please email us at hello@smartandpublicpod, or you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube at Smart and Public Pod. And thank you so much, Daniela. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Not you, Daniela, just you, Duffy. Okay, bye.